Okay, let's get started. So we were looking at exception handling in Java yesterday. So I'll start because we were interrupted in the middle. I'll start from the beginning again, do a quick recap, and then we'll start with where we left off. So what did we see? My screen is visible, right? Yeah. Okay. So we saw that there are a different kind of errors possible in the programs that happen at runtime. What does it mean? They happen when the program is being executed, right? When they are being executed by the JVM, there are certain errors that can happen, and if not taken care by of, what do they do? They stop the program, right? So when we are writing small programs, that behavior is still acceptable. But when we are building big applications, right? Applications like Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, and if there is an error that occurs in that those applications, they should not stop, right? They are supposed to run 24 cross 7, right? So you can access Facebook anytime you want to. So that is where the error handling part comes in. So we need to take care of all the scenarios where there can be a error at runtime, right? If we don't, what will happen? The program just terminates. The program terminates. Okay. So now thrown exception. Okay. So now we saw we follow this particular pattern for handling the exceptions. So whatever statement is possible, for whatever statement that can throw an error, whatever statements in Java that can throw an error are included in the try block, and we catch those exceptions in the catch clause, right? We catch those exceptions in the catch clause, right? And we can have multiple catch blocks to catch the exact error, right? So then we looked at the terminology. In Java, we say we throw exception. We throw an exception and then we catch it in the catch clause, right? So a thrown exception is an exception that has occurred, right? What is the stack trace? So stack trace basically describes what is the problem, what type of error occurred, and where in the method did that error occur, or where in the program, which line number did that error occur. So one such example is arithmetic exception that can arise from a different number of problems, but the simplest example is divide by 0. So let's quickly see the program. So we saw this program yesterday, right? We tried adding, we tried dividing 10 by 0. Our A is equal to 0, B is 10. What did we say? We said we'll try dividing 10 by 0, right? And then we had a few set of statements here, right? And this was inside the try, right? So what do we do here? We simply come here and we say ask it to throw E. We ask it to throw E, right? So now as the point where we throw an exception, the execution stops. So let's look at this example again. So it says before calculating C, there is an error. There is an error called Java lang arithmetic exception divide by 0 at exception example dot main. Let's look at it. So what do we have? We have a variable called A, B and C. A is 0, B is 10 and C is also 10. Now what do we say? We say C is equal to B divided by A. Now there is a divide by 0 scenario here because we are dividing 10 by 0, which is not allowed. So what happens here? An exception is thrown, and whenever an exception is thrown inside a try block, what happens? As soon as the exception is thrown, the program stops the execution inside the try block, right? Now, instead of throwing this exception here, what did we see? This value was not executed, right? It only printed before calculating C. Only printed before calculating C. So only this statement was printed, right? This print statement was not executed, neither was this print statement, right? And because we are throwing it inside the catch block, so the program stops here. So even this statement was not executed. So now let's see what happens. Instead of throwing the error, if I simply say got the arithmetic exception. Now I say whenever the error occurs, simply print the statement and continue the execution. Let's recompile the program and rerun it. Now see, it says before calling C, so this statement is executed, then an error occur, this statement is skipped, this statement is not executed, B is equal to C by C plus B. This statement is not executed, neither is this. Simply after executing this, the error is thrown and it comes and it is caught in this catch clause. It is caught in this catch clause. Now what happens? It simply prints I caught the arithmetic exception and it continues. But when we saw there is a throw, when we throw an exception, the program execution stops there, right? The program execution stops there. Okay, so you have seen this. So yeah, when an exception occurs, the try block terminates immediately, right? The try block terminates immediately. So whenever an exception occurs, the try block terminates immediately, right? As soon as the exception occurs, the try block will start. Now the try statement consists of try blocks and corresponding catch and finally. So we'll look at what is finally for and what is finally. But for now, simple basics of exception handling in Java, we should only concentrate and focus on two things. The first is we have a try clause. Inside the try clause, we add all the statements where an exception can occur, right? So what do we add inside the try clause? We add the statements, we add the following statements inside the try clause. What are the statements? First one is the statements that can throw and throw a runtime error. Second, the statements that should not be executed if the previous statement has given a runtime error, right? So always remember this. This is very important. If you remember these 2 points, you'll be able to properly handle errors in all your applications, right? You'll be able to build more robust solutions, right? That will not crash easily. So simply, what are we doing here? We say try, right? If as soon as we see there's an error, we say we will not calculate b, right? And we will not print these two. So I did not want to print these three statements if the error occurred. So they were included inside the try block. They were included inside the try block, right? So let's follow. Now program control does not return to throw point. It says after the error is occurred, right? Throw point is, this is our throw point, point where the exception is thrown. The point where the exception is thrown, right? So what happens is, as soon as the error occurs, the try block is terminated, right? The program flow will not return to that throw point anymore. It will not go back to that throw point, right? Now the flow of the program, that is, after we catch the exception and inside the catch clause, if we don't throw an exception, right, the program flow will continue after the last catch block. Remember I said we can have multiple catch blocks. So the program flow will continue after the last catch blocks, right? So this is the throw point. After the catch is done, the program continues execution from here. The program continues execution from here, provided we don't throw an error in the catch block. We don't throw an error in the catch block. Any doubts, SBG College? Please let me know if you have any doubts. I'll pause here for 2 minutes. So look at this program. This is what we did yesterday. I think you joined in late. So please look at it, analyze everything, and if there's any doubt, just ask your coordinator to type in the chat box. I'll be more than happy to explain it again. Even if you just want to repeat this topic, just ask your coordinator to type it. I'll repeat this topic again. Okay, let's continue then. So what it says is enclosing code in a try block. So what does the, again the same thing. So try block encloses the code that might throw an exception, and the code that should not execute if an exception occurs, right? The try block encloses code that might throw an exception, and the code that should not execute if an exception occurs. It just says that the try block is declared as try, which is a keyword followed by a open bracket and a close bracket. Okay, so now let's look at what are the throws clauses, right? So I think we did a program for this as well yesterday. So yeah, yes. So now when we divide it here, what do we say? We have a program called static main. We create an object for the class. We create an object for the class, object for the class. Now inside that try block, we call the method. We call the method, right? What does that method do? It says it throws an exception. We declare it as it throws an exception. So for the time being, let's do this. Let's not declare this here, right? And let's execute this. So what happens here? It says error was thrown, right? What happens now is it simply goes here, right? It simply goes here, right? And instead of, so it instead of the error happening here, what happens? We declare, we have used this method here. So we simply say this method, an exception occurred here, the section is thrown to this point. So basically it is thrown here again, occurs at this point, it propagates back to where the method call was made, right? Until the time it is caught, it is kept on throwing back, right? And eventually it is caught here, it is caught here, right? When it is caught, we simply say, right? So if I recompile it now, it says exception caught, and then it says error was thrown, right? Then it says error was thrown. So what is happening? Let's look at it. So throws clause is used to declare the exception that can be thrown by a method. That can be thrown by a method. So what is the difference between throw and throws? When we say throw, we are actually throwing an exception. But when we use throws, we are simply saying, hey, it is likely that this method might throw an exception of this type. This method might throw an exception of this type, right? So you need to take care of this exception if you are calling this method, right? So it simply says exceptions can be thrown by statements in methods body of by methods called in methods body, right? Statements can be thrown, exceptions can be thrown by statements in methods body or by methods called in methods body. So it is your responsibility to take care of those methods, those exceptions, right? It says, it says, it is this method might throw this exception, right? This method might throw this exception. It says it is your responsibility to whoever is calling this method, the statements or the method declared inside this method or declared method or methods executed inside this method might throw the might throw an exception of type arithmetic exception. Please add a try catch block around this method if you are calling it, right? It simply says add a try catch block around this method call, right? What is throws used for? Throws simply says if you are using this method, you need to add a try clause block around it. You need to add a try block and a catch clause around it. All right. So with exception handling, the program catches and handles the exception, right? When the code is executed inside a try block, an exception is thrown, we can catch it with the catch clause, right? It allows the user to try again if, for example, an invalid input is entered, right? An invalid input is entered. So let's look at the sequence of events. The preceding step is the previous statement. I enter the try block, an exception is thrown. So let's say we have multiple catch blocks. Now we have multiple catch blocks. So the first catch block does not catch the exception. It does not match the exception, right? The first catch block does not catch the exception. It does not match the exception's type. So the exception is passed on to the next block. The exception is passed on to the next block, right? So if the exception is now matched here, right? The exception is matched here. So what is all this? We have a we have a try try block, and then we have multiple catch. Let's say this is a catch for arithmetic exception, right? This is for arithmetic exception. Let's say we have another one for array index out of bounds, right? We have another one for this. Let's say we have a third one for we have a third one for
It's 3 o'clock.
mm, a simple one, right? IO exception. We have a third one called IO exception. We'll look at what are IO exception for later. Now, let's say what I was trying to do was I declared an array here. I declared an array here, array, a character array of size 0, 1 and 2. I declared a character array here of size 0, 1 and 2. And then I tried to print array of 90. Now how many what is the size of this array? What is the size of this array? The size of the array is 0, 1 and 2. That is 3. The size of this array is 3. Now I am trying to access the index which is the 90, which is not in array range. It is not an element of the array. So what happens? It throws an array index out of bounds exception. It throws an array index out of bounds exception. So now what will happen? The first clause will not match it. Arithmetic exception will not match it. What will match? Array index out of bound exception will be matched. So as soon as the second catch clause is matched, the third catch clause is not executed. It simply follows the next step, right? Let's look at an example for this. When exception multiple catch .java. Let's write the class. What should the class name same as the file name? The class name should always be same as the file name. Then we have our main function, right? Now let's declare an array. Let's declare a character array AR. We can add any random values to this. What is the size? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's first directly start accessing the size and see what happens. exe multiple mul tiple catch. Right, what is it saying? Oh, sorry. What happens? It says exception. It throws an exception. Array index out of bounds. It throws an exception. Array index out of bounds. Right? So what do we do now? We simply surround it with a catch clause. Try. We say catch. Let's say the first exception that we are catching is arithmetic exception, right? And we say arithmetic exception occurred. Then we say array index out of bounds exception. Array index out of bounds exception. We simply say invalid index given for the array. And then we have our third catch statement, IO exception. Exception, IO exception occurred. And then we say then we say exception occurred and caught, and the normal program flow continues from here, right? Let's execute this program. Mm, just cannot find symbol IO exception. Okay. Um, small in IO, no, it's big. Okay, let's take the superclass exception, right? Says invalid index range given for the array, that is the exception occurs here. Okay, this is the wrong file. It's the right file. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So as soon as we execute this print statement inside the try block, what does it see? It sees that the wrong index value is being given. It goes to the first catch block. In the exception of type array index out of bounds it's thrown, right? It tries to match it with arithmetic exception, does not match in the first catch clause, then it goes to the second catch clause, then it goes to the second catch clause where it tries to match it with array index out of bounds exception, right? There it matches and it says invalid index given for the array, invalid index given for the array, right? And finally it says print this, then this is skipped, this is skipped. This statement is not executed, this is executed because the exception thrown matches the clause in this catch clause, right? Catch clause does not match with the error thrown, right? So it matches here right? This statement is skipped, this statement is skipped, this is executed, and then the normal program flow continues. Then the normal program flow continues, and this statement is also executed, right? This statement is also executed. Is it clear what happens when we have multiple catch blocks is? Please take a look at it and let me know if there are any doubts.